What's up, metal and heavy music fans? Today we are ranking the 4th albums from classic black metal bands. Alright, let's kick things off with a huge one in Bathory, Blood, Fire, Death. So, to me, this is their best album easily, and one of the records that truly won me over to black metal to begin with. I love the hints of Viking metal mixed in with the raw, balls-to-the-wall blackness. Also a big fan of the cover, which is from the painting The Wild Hunt of Odin, in keeping with those themes. Quorthon called it the beginning of his second trilogy. Some of my favorites here in the Golden Wall of Heaven, Pace Till Death, Holocaust, and Blood, Fire, Death. Absolutely top shelf stuff here. Gotta go at perfection tier. Alright, next up we have Burzum with Filosofem, and finally we get to the one Burzum album I actually fully enjoy. This is Varg's last recording before he went to prison, and it wasn't released until '96. Amazingly, Dunkelheit had a music video and still got airtime on MTV and VH1. More experimental than past releases and considered his masterwork by some, although considering this is Varg we're talking about here, that's a relative bar, I guess. Jesus Told is my favorite track, but I just enjoy the overall atmosphere of this album. It's gotta go at fantastic. Burzum fans can finally rejoice. There's your win. It's the only one you're gonna get. Alright, let's go to Carpathian Forest with Defending the Throne of Evil. So, love the moody synth opening of It's Darker Than You Think before the transitions into the blast beats. Also cool spiraling guitars with a little choral synths really conjuring imagery of this vortex of souls falling into hell. Lots of great moments like that in general, and just a good handle on songwriting. Put to Sleep Like a Sick Animal is another standout. Also that opening riff on Hymn Till Dodin fucking slaps so hard, or the wailing sax moment and delay effects on Ancient Spirits of the Underworld. Definitely yet another album on this list to represent a change in sound, and there are several of them, which makes sense given the lineup shift for this particular band. The punk rock attitude is still there to get me banging my head, but now combined with a lot more atmosphere. This is also actually their highest rated album on Metal Storm, and I agree, it's pretty great, if a little on the long side. I'm going to put it at great tier. Alright, then we have Samael with Passage. So at this point they moved into more overt focus on keyboards and industrial metal, as well as more cosmic and occult themes as opposed to satanic ones. It definitely grew their audience, and it's available in both 11 and 17 track versions. Considered a pillar of black industrial metal, which got me pretty hyped as I had not listened to this album, but I'm a huge fan of industrial music in particular. Personally though, while I'm still enjoying the music and symphonic elements, I'm not as into the vocal direction and overall just effect of this one. Up to this point, I've been having a really fun time with this discography, but this was the first time I was kind of losing interest and just sort of checking out minute after minute. The piano and wild drumming on Angel's Decay is a fun little detour, but the rest kind of just runs together. Very samey sounding record. People seem to enjoy it, but I don't know, it seems like on paper something I would love, but ultimately I'm just going to put it at good tier. Alright, let's get a little Gorgoroth on the map here with Destroyer, or About How to Philosophize with the Hammer. Love that subtitle on this one. Infernus is the only consistent member on all of these tracks. There are 4 different vocalists, including himself, Pest, T-Reaper, and, of course, Gaul. So, kind of unsurprisingly, it ends up being a mess, partially as a result of that, partially just because these songs are really all over the place. It's one of their lower rated albums. I don't have much to say about it. It's not the worst thing I've heard, but among their worst for sure, and not something I see a whole lot of value in revisiting other than as part of like a transitional oddity. This is the ugly chrysalis they will emerge from much stronger on the other side. I'm going to put this one at okay tier. Alright, back to the good though. We've got Windir with Likferd. This is my second favorite Windir album, and sadly their last, but they went out at the top of their game. And as tragic as it was to lose Valfor, I can think of no less of a black metal way to go out than in a snowstorm in the woods of the family cabin. Wouldn't recommend it, but it is what it is. Once more, it feels like those trademark folky Windir guitar melodies put you on a windswept mountainside overlooking a vast, beautiful landscape. More great great tracks here like Resurrection of the Wild Despot, Fagning, and Dowden. Perfection. There's no chance it belongs anywhere less than that. Alright, Emperor with Prometheus, The Discipline of Fire and Demise. Another final album with the focus more on progressive metal, which Ihsahn would continue with his solo work. Definitely feels more akin to one of his solo albums too than an actual Emperor album. Another great opener here with the harpsichord and strings on the Eruption. Very interesting vocal performances here too, alongside these super rocking guitars. Kind of what a heavier version of Queen might sound like. The orchestration is great, but he hadn't quite mastered his clean vocals yet. Depraved is packed with some awesome squealy guitars, awesome strings on Empty, which also had a music video. I actually hadn't checked this album out, but I really enjoyed it. It may not be on the level of the first two albums, but it was definitely a highlight of this particular grouping. I'm going to put it at fantastic. Alright, Mayhem, Ordo ad Chao. This is the first album with Attila back since De Mysteris Dom Satanas, which isn't really a selling point since I don't really love that album or his vocals to begin with. This also backtracks into a more raw direction with the production, lots of doomier sections and even some death metal influences in the vocals. It ends up feeling very improvisational, which on the one hand is kind of interesting, but on the other makes it feel pretty inconsistent. I will say that the drumming is always on point, and this is actually their highest charting album in Norway at number 12. And it also received the Spellemann Award for Best Heavy Metal Album in 2008. Not exactly my style. I don't think it deserves the bottom, but still pretty low for me. I'm going to put it at good. Alright, Satyricon with Rebel Extravaganza. Definitely another stylistic shift from the previous albums. A lot more raw and stripped back. Almost feels like a live recording at times as opposed to the previous walls of sound. Incorporating some industrial elements on the tracks like Havoc Vulture, but not necessarily enough to call it like an industrial metal album like Samael. Definitely gets a little bit repetitive in places versus how tight some of the previous songs were, but regardless, it's got a good mix of aggro and more atmospheric elements, tossing in some church bells, organ, flutes, etc. So kind of interesting, but a bit meandering and also way too long. It is named one of the 20 best metal albums of 1999 by Metal Hammer. I'm going to put it at great tier. Alright, Dimmu Borgir with Spiritual Black Dimensions. So this sees ICS Vortex, who is also on this list with Borknagar, joining their ranks for his fantastic operatic editions, continuing to step up the atmosphere and symphonic elements. Tons of classic songs here like Reptile, Dreamside Dominions, Behind the Curtains of Night, Grotesquerie Concealed. Slightly inconsistent, not quite perfection, but a very popular album in my high school group. Another case of a first album I bought a copy of in a discography too. I'm going to put it at fantastic. Alright, Marduk with Heaven Shall Burn When We Are Gathered. So this is the first album with Legion on vocals. Another one shifting to a more minimalist, live-sounding style. Kind of similar to what I was saying about Satyricon, but less experimental. Pretty by-the-numbers black metal album. Not bad, not great. I was interested to see it was rated slightly higher than Opus Nocturne on Metal Storm, because I like that album way more. On the plus side, it does know what it is a little bit better than Rebel Extravaganza in its only 35-minute runtime. I also like Glorification of the Black God, which has melodies and direct samples from the classical arrangement Night on Bald Mountain. I'm going to put this one at good tier. Alright, speaking of Borknagar, we have Quintessence. Now, initially, this was meant to be a more straightforward black metal release as per the harsh production quality and vocals, though it definitely expanded beyond that again. Not necessarily loving the vocals on this one, it's kind of grating in places, like both the harsh and clean ones, especially the harmonizing on The Presence is Ominous honestly made me want to turn it off. Fortunately, it does get better after that, but kind of surprised at how beloved this album is. Like, I'd take any of the first three over this one in a second. I would have liked more of the vocal style from Colossus, which is a solid track. Invincible and Icon Dreams, good as well. Stronger than the lower tier albums on this list in its songwriting and instrumentation, but not close to top either. I think it fits somewhere in the middle at great tier. Alright, Dark Funeral, Attera, Totus, Sanctus. Now, I discovered from my Dark Funeral discography tier list that some people love this album, but I cannot get past the pretty terrible vocal performance here. I already shared more of my thoughts on that in that video, but overall, this band just in general has always been well below most of the others, and this album in particular has no way to compete with some of the others on this list. if you ask me. So I'm putting it at okay, not my thing. Rotting Christ, a dead poem. So slowing down the tempo some more and really perfecting the formula they'd been working towards leading up to this album with the acoustic guitars and regional music. It's really like a Greek black metal classic, I would say. The opening melody of Sorrowful Farewell just sort of washes over you and fills me with this sense of real grief. Among Two Storms has that great descending palm-muted riff that reminds me of Ain't Talking About Love in a weird way. Tons of great riffs and hooks in general. Love the production, which is actually courtesy of Zai of Samael, who also provided some of the keys here. Really fantastic album and one of Rotting Christ's best to this day, I would say. So perfection for that one. Alright, Darkthrone, Panzerfaust. So this album, if I could describe it in one word, it's fucking loud. And also just very angry. Nocturnal Culto sounds completely unhinged, and it's kind of a love it or hate it kind of thing after the trilogy that came before this. Now, Chris and I spoke about these albums at length on our Darkthrone discography tier list. He mentioned that he's pretty sure Nocturno was like doing a lot of drinking during this recording. Maybe both of them were. And then on top of that, the production is raw as usual, but this time the vocal track is cranked way up to the point that he sometimes drowns out the rest of the music. Kind of weird, but also interesting, and not without its share of great guitar melodies and a certain amount of charm. If you can get used to being screamed at for 40 minutes straight, it's still kind of a classic. So of the options here, I'm actually going to put it at great tier, if not a little bit at the lower end. Alright, Cradle of Filth, Midian. So I haven't gotten much pushback, almost surprisingly, on continuing to include Cradle in the previous video, so I'm just going to continue to do so, even if they don't even self-identify as black metal per se. In any case, this was my introduction to the band, and I can still remember the exact moment I heard Cthulhu Dawn. Amazing song that just gives me a wave of nostalgia every time I listen to it and still holds up. Also love Saffron's Curse, Death Magic for Adepts, and Lord Abortion, and still one of my favorites in their discography. It's loosely based on Clive Barker's Cabal, or Nightbreed as the movie was called. Doug Bradley, who was in the movie and also better known for his role as Pinhead, also provides narration as he did on a few other albums of theirs. Maybe not as consistent as some of these others, but I'm still gonna put it up at fantastic. Like, really solid, fun album. Then we have Immortal with Blizzard Beasts. Now, this is easily my least favorite Immortal album, and the only one I don't often revisit. Listening to it this time, I was kind of like, oh, it's okay. Maybe it's not as bad as I remember, but yeah, it's not terrible. It's just very forgettable, is what I find. And at least it is under 30 minutes, and it has its moments. Mountains of Might has a pretty cool melody to it. So overall, I'm going to put this one also at okay tier, but it's at the higher end out of these options. Fortunately, they're going to rally in a big way with the next album. And then finally, we're going to end on Enslaved with Blodhemn, which translates to Blood Revenge. One of my favorites of their early discography alongside Frost, before they moved into a more progressive direction. Continuing in on the Viking and Norse mythology themes, with more of that coming through in some of the music as well. Erdical Gods is a top 10 Enslaved song, but I'm also a big fan of I Lenker til Ragnarok, Nidineslagt, and the title track, and I'm doing my best. I do not know Norwegian. Lots of great fast moments on here, and just top tier performances. Pretty much a perfect album from start to finish. Once more, Enslaved, proving why they are one of the best bands on this list, and another album to perfection tier for them. Y'all check out this playlist for more black metal videos in this series and others. And let me know down in the comments what is your favorite black metal album on this list and why. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.